Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I sat in my easy chair, watching my wife of 7 years walk out the door, soon to be my ex-wife. I wasn't sure how I felt about it yet. Too little time had passed since she told me she wanted a divorce. This morning, she had asked me to be home by 7 p.m. for a talk. When I came in, I noticed there was no dinner prepared, which unsettled me. What I felt next was far worse. 30 minutes ago, Mara was upstairs and came down when she heard the door close. "Hi," she said. "Sit in the living room. I have some things to say." She continued, "When we first got married, I thought we'd have a good life together. But the last 5 years have made me realize that staying married to you isn't what I want. You're never home, and when you are, you're usually too tired to take care of me." I interrupted, "That's true, but someone has to pay the bills. You work, but I don't get any help from you. My money comes from working long hours, and most of that is because I'm willing to go out of town for days on end fixing equipment for Turner Tech. If you'd be willing to contribute, I'll ask my boss to keep me in town. You don't help around the place either," she said. "You could at least tend to the flower beds you demanded be planted in the backyard. You tell me they need weeding when I've been gone for a week. You could hire that done, and then we could go dancing once in a while. And what would I be paying them with if I did that, Mara? It will get better. I'm due for a raise in 3 months, and then I can cut back on the out-of-town work. I'm not waiting 3 more months, James. I think we'd better call it quits. I'm sick of being alone. I want a little excitement in my life, and you aren't giving it to me. I'm sorry, but I'm bailing out." "Are you talking about divorce?" "Yes. 6 months from now, we'll both be free. Who's paying for this? They'll cover the court costs. That's fair." "Okay, do it, then." Mara Miller put on her coat and walked toward the door. She paused as if to say something but didn't. I sat there in the chair and watched her walk away. She was attractive, and she knew it. Self-centered? Absolutely. Demanding? That too. Would I miss her? Sure, for a while. She was something to come home to and someone I thought I loved. Now, I didn't know. I guessed I would go out to eat. I didn't even look in the refrigerator. As I was getting into my car, I thought back over our conversation. Not once had the word love crossed our lips, hers or mine. That was sad. I walked into Riley's pub. It had been a couple of weeks since I had crossed this threshold. In a way, what Mara had proposed hurt, but I knew I would get over it. As I sat at the bar, I remembered I hadn't bought my weekly scratch ticket. I walked down to where Riley cashed out his customers. "Give me a $10 one tonight. I'm going to bet it all." I usually bought 10 $1 tickets, but tonight I was bold. I slipped it into my shirt pocket and watched the television over the bar. An advertisement came on for the state lottery. The jackpot was up to $100,000. "Hey, Riley, give me a state lottery ticket too. They'll cut down to $8 next week. Hell, give me one for the Power Play lottery as well. When's the drawing for that one?" "Saturday." "You cheap bastard, you could afford a ticket each week. You and your scratch tickets. You'll never get rich buying them. You've got to go for the big money. You got numbers you want to play on the lottery or go for the random pick. Let the machine do it. Hell, machines are getting smarter than me anyway. I bet they get as much loving as I do, too." I grabbed a handful of peanuts and asked the waitress to move my beer to a booth for me. Stupid rule. A patron couldn't carry a beer across the room. Ben and Alice Reed came in and joined me. I drank another beer and felt hungry. I had purposely kept my mind off Mara. At Joe's Steakhouse, I ordered the smallest steak on the menu and had another beer with it. Finishing the meal, I decided I didn't need dessert, so I had one more beer. This was decidedly over my limit, and I knew I had to be careful driving home. Home, I thought. That's a hoot. It was only an empty house unless Mara had changed her mind. She hadn't said when she was leaving. Maybe she had already left. She certainly hadn't walked out the door as if she was returning. Probably over at her sister Sophie's. Sophie was all right. She never would have treated me the way Mara had. Oh well, screw the whole family. I was getting maudlin. Guess I'd better head home. In bed, I didn't stop except to use the bathroom. As I undressed, I felt the lottery ticket in my pocket. I sat on the edge of the bed and scratched the emblems. I matched 3 cows. No pigs or hens. Wow, $15,000. I scratched one more, and another cow appeared. I was up to $200,000. I was getting excited now. Hell, with shaking fingers, I did the last one, $50,000 freaking dollars. I had a year to turn the ticket in and collect. I started laughing. Let Mara Miller pay for the divorce, I thought. You stupid woman. I'd be a free man by the time I had to collect on this. Smiling still, I locked the bedroom door and went to bed. If Mara came home, she could sleep in the spare room. That ticket would keep me warm tonight. When I got up in the morning, it depressed me some, until I remembered the ticket. Maybe I had better make sure it was safe if I wasn't going to cash it in right away. I was due at work by 9 but had been known to be late. I waited for the bank to open and rented a safe deposit box. I put the ticket in and decided to store both lottery tickets with it. I wrote the numbers down and put the scrap of paper in my wallet. Who knows? Was my life going to change? I didn't think it would much, not in the short term. I was due to fly out at 3 in the afternoon. I worked in the office preparing for my trip and went home at noon to shower and shave. Still no sign of Mara. I called Sophie Harper, my sister-in-law. Seen Mara? She didn't come home last night. She's here, Sophie said. Talk to her and tell her how stupid she is. What do you want, James? Mara's voice was sharp and cold. You didn't say you were leaving this soon. Well, I am. In fact, I've already left. When are you coming to get your things? Tomorrow or this weekend? Are you asking for the house in the divorce? There's still a big mortgage on it. No, you can keep it if you want to pay the mortgage. I'll need a list of your assets to take to the attorney. I know most of what you have, so I won't get much. I don't care. I just want to get away from you and get on with my life. Fix it up, and I'll sign the papers. Mara, I think you're making a mistake. We could have worked this out. As I said, I'll be home more in a short while. No, I want out. I just fell out of love with you. I want to start over with someone else. Have you anyone waiting in the wings? No, James. I wouldn't do that to you. I can't say there might not be someone before the divorce is final. Would you at least let me have that and not cause any trouble? Sure, Mara, whatever. I can see there's no more life together for us. I guess this is the best way for us to split. Have a good life. I hung up the phone, gathered my bag, and headed for the airport. It was Friday, and I'd be gone until next Tuesday. Mara would be in to clean her stuff out of the house. Odd, but I trusted her to take only what she was entitled to. Maybe we couldn't love each other, but we still had a little respect. I was halfway across the country by Saturday morning, repairing a commercial printer. Around lunchtime, I remembered that my state lottery drawing had been the night before. $100,000 would look pretty good in my bank account, I thought. I logged in on my laptop to check the state website during lunch. Nada. No winners. Maybe Tuesday, I thought, but I wasn't where I could buy a ticket. Oh well, it was just $2. It took me until 6 p.m. to finish the repair job to my satisfaction. I went out to eat and then stopped for a beer at a bar I'd been to before in this town. Too sleepy to wait for the power play drawing that night, I headed to my motel room and went to bed. Sunday morning, I worked on another printer for the same company. At lunch, I checked the power play numbers in the local paper. Nothing again. Oh well, I muttered. It's only $3 down the drain. I arrived back home on Tuesday night and checked in at the office Wednesday morning. The good news was I'd be home for the rest of the week. When I walked into the house, I saw that Mara had taken several things from the kitchen. The dining table was gone, but she'd left the high stools for the breakfast counter. I'll manage, I thought. It just gives me more room to move around. A couple of envelopes were propped on the counter. One contained the divorce papers. The other was a list of everything Mara had taken from the house. I was surprised and a little angry when I saw she had cleared out our bedroom, the king-sized bed, both dressers, and the nightstands. She'd even taken the 2 bedside lamps. I went upstairs to find the bedroom bare. Down the hall, the guest bedroom was now my new room. Mara had organized everything neatly. My clothes were in the dresser, and my suits hung in the closet. A note sat on the nightstand. James, I hope this is okay. I found an apartment and didn't want to buy too much furniture. You probably will want a smaller bed now that you're alone. Someday soon, I hope to find someone to share my bed every night. For the last few years, I was getting lonelier every time you went away. I suppose I cheated you by not helping with expenses, but I knew this was coming and needed the money to start over. You could sue me for it, but would it be worth the trouble? You can see that I stopped contributing to or withdrawing from our joint accounts 3 days before I told you I was leaving. I think that's fair. If you don't, call me and we can discuss it. Sophie thinks I'm stupid for doing this, but she has Jim and her kids to keep her happy. We never had that. I could say I still love you, but I don't know if I do. I'm fond of you anyway. Take care. Mara, I went back downstairs and opened the refrigerator. It was spotless but completely empty. The house itself was immaculate. I read over the divorce papers. They were exactly as Mara had described. All that was left was my signature. I signed and slid them into the stamped envelope she had thoughtfully provided. I looked outside. The lawn needed mowing, the flower beds were overgrown, and the sprinkler system needed to be turned on. Mara had wanted the home to be a showplace, but it always seemed to fall on me to maintain it. Someday, I thought, I'll rip up the flower beds and put grass in. I'll buy a bigger mower and finish the lawn in half an hour. Not today, though. Maybe tomorrow. I headed out for dinner, lingering over the meal while observing other diners. I saw a couple arguing and another so in love it was almost tangible. There were two families with kids, one with brats and another where the kids clearly respected and loved their parents. I wondered what kind of family Mara and I would have been if we'd had children. Would our kids have been brats or well-mannered? After dinner, I headed over to Riley's pub for a beer. It was quiet when I arrived. I bought 3 $2 scratch tickets and gave Riley the numbers from the state lottery ticket I had in the safe deposit box. I did the same for the power play ticket. Riley laughed at me. Sucker is born every minute. Yeah, maybe, but you still sell the tickets, I replied with a smirk. We got to talking, and I broke down and shared the new developments in my life. Riley and I went way back to when I was a teenager, and he lived next door to my parents. Mara had been in the pub a few times, but she never warmed to Riley, so I stopped asking her to join me there. So, what are your plans now? Riley asked. I haven't made any, I admitted. I looked outside earlier and saw all the work I have to do around the house. There's the inside housework too. I might chuck it all and buy a condo. Of course, I owe a lot on the house, so if I sell, I won't get much for it. I'd just be trading one mortgage for another. What you need to do is get someone in to share expenses and help with the housework. Kind of like a roommate or something. I don't know. Could I trust a person? Mara wasn't the best sometimes, but I trusted her. I knew where I stood with her. I chuckled. Or did until she threw divorce papers at me. Even now, I've let her call the shots, knowing she wasn't out to do me any harm. You still love her? I guess not. This is pretty inconvenient, that's all. Customers came in, and I didn't have a chance to talk to Riley again that evening. I went home and went to bed early. On Thursday, I finally mowed the lawn but didn't touch the flower beds. I didn't think my neighbors knew Mara had moved out, as I chatted with a few of them as they passed by, and no one mentioned anything. When I went back to Riley's that evening, he teased me. I suppose you want another power play ticket. No winners again. The jackpot's climbing to serious money. This poor sucker is still with you. Give me the same numbers and one scratch ticket too. I scratched the ticket at the bar, and it was a $15 winner. Riley handed me the cash from the till. Honestly, James, are you ahead on your winnings? Knowing you, you've kept track. I have, Riley, and I'm ahead. I'm waiting until Mara and my divorce is settled before I let anyone know how far ahead I am. I think she wouldn't cause any trouble if she found out I was a winner, but I'm not taking any chances. The week passed quietly. On Sunday, I stopped by the pub again and bought tickets for Tuesday and Wednesday's drawings. I had to be out of town until Thursday but felt prepared. Dust was beginning to collect in the house, and it smelled closed up. Could I stand it? I guessed I could. I planned my meals carefully, making sure I didn't leave anything to spoil while I was away. Sunday evening, Sophie called me. How's it going, James? Not bad, really. There's a little more work around the place, but overall I'm getting along okay. How's Mara and her new lifestyle? She's doing fine. She goes out a lot with her coworkers and has a nice place to live. Her expenses are more than she expected, but I warned her about that. I think she went on one date, but he didn't stay over. She still wakes up alone, which seems to be her biggest complaint. That'll change. I just hope she doesn't settle for less than she deserves. I knew you'd say that. You're too damn sweet for your own good. Thanks, Sophie. I love you too. Hey, I'm traveling in the morning. Thanks for calling. You're special in my book. Say hi to Jim for me. Maybe you'll let him out, so we can have a beer together sometime. Take me with you next time, she joked. The kids wonder why you don't come around more often. I will, on one condition, invite me over for that famous chop suey of yours on Thursday. I'll be back in town that day. Deal. Bring the bread and beer. I flew out the next morning for a short job. Different company, different location. Mara had claimed she'd been lonely all those years. But what about me? Didn't she think I felt the same way? The state lottery drawing was held on Tuesday, and as expected, I wasn't a winner. Oh well, I thought. Riley would still sell me another ticket, and I'd keep trying. The Power Play lottery prize had climbed to over $200 million. I couldn't even imagine that amount of money, but I figured I'd keep buying tickets as long as the jackpot stayed enticing. By the time I returned home Thursday evening, I was ready for Sophie's chop suey. Her husband Jim was grilling when I arrived, and the kids ran up to greet me. It was nice to feel wanted somewhere. Sophie served her legendary dish, and we all sat down to eat together. Felt like family, something I hadn't experienced in years. After dinner, Sophie pulled me aside. Mara mentioned you've been seeing someone? Who's the lucky lady? I laughed. Not quite. There's no one. Oh, come on. Jim says you're different these days. Happier. Maybe it's just that you're not fighting with Mara anymore. That could be it, I said with a shrug. But no, there's no one. Not yet. Anyway, you'll find someone, James. You're a good man. Just don't wait too long. The following week, Riley's pub was busier than usual. Word had gotten out that someone in the city had won a substantial lottery prize, but the winner hadn't come forward yet. Riley was bursting with pride, having sold the ticket. When I walked in, Riley greeted me with a grin. Hey James, any luck this week? Nothing yet, I replied, sliding into my usual seat. You know, he said, leaning in, it could have been one of your tickets that hit big. Just saying. I chuckled. Wouldn't that be something? Guess I'll have to wait and see. He handed me my usual scratch ticket, and I scratched it right there at the bar. $5, I said, holding it up. Riley shook his head. You've got the luck of the devil, James. Don't waste it. I'm working on it, I replied, pocketing the winnings. The days began to blur together as I settled into my new routine. Work kept me busy, and the house was quieter than I cared to admit. One evening, Sophie called again. You should come by more often, she said. The kids miss you. I will, I promised. How's Mara? She's doing okay. Still adjusting to her new life, but she seems happy. Good for her, I said. Tell her I said hi. After hanging up, I realized I hadn't thought much about Mara lately. The sting of her departure had faded, replaced by a sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to move on. The next few weeks passed without much fanfare. Work kept me occupied, and I'd gotten used to the quiet house. One evening, Riley called me as I was finishing dinner. James, you need to get down here. I think you might want to check something. What's this about, Riley? I'm not saying anything over the phone. Just come by. Bring your ticket numbers. Intrigued, I grabbed the paper with the numbers I'd written down from the safe deposit box and headed to the pub. When I arrived, Riley had a big grin plastered across his face. He waved me over to the bar. Look at this. He pointed to a piece of paper taped to the counter. It listed the winning numbers for the recent state lottery drawing. My heart raced as I compared them to the numbers in my pocket. They matched. Every single one. Holy, are you serious? I asked, stunned. Dead serious, James. Congratulations. You just became a rich man. The realization hit me like a freight train. The prize was $250,000. After taxes, it wouldn't be life-changing, but it was enough to make a big dent in my mortgage or start fresh somewhere else. Riley, you haven't told anyone, have you? Of course not, he said. I figured you'd want to keep it quiet for now. Thanks. Let's keep it that way until I decide what to do. Riley nodded, pouring me a celebratory beer on the house. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made a trip to the bank to retrieve the winning ticket. I took a deep breath as I handed it over to the lottery office. They confirmed the win and explained the process for receiving the payout. I opted for a lump sum after taxes, which came to just over $180,000. Driving home, I felt an odd mix of excitement and nervousness. What was I going to do with the money? Pay off the house? Invest? Travel? One thing was certain, I wasn't telling Mara about it. Our divorce was final in 2 months, and I didn't want to complicate things. Later that week, Sophie invited me over for dinner again. I brought wine and some of my newfound good mood. James, you seem lighter these days. Sophie said as we sat on her back porch. Things are looking up, I admitted. It feels like a fresh start. Well, good for you. You deserve it. The kids ran around the yard, laughing and chasing each other. Watching them, I couldn't help but think about the life I'd almost had with Mara. But those thoughts didn't sting as much anymore. Sophie was right, it was time for a fresh start. The following Saturday, I was back at Riley's. As I scratched my ticket, Riley leaned over. Any plans for the big win? Not yet, I said, smiling. Still figuring it out. Well, don't forget where it came from, Riley teased. Maybe you'll bring some of that luck back here. Maybe, I said, pocketing the $10 winner from my scratch ticket. Some habits were hard to break. Life continued to settle into a new normal. With the lottery winnings quietly tucked away in my account, I felt a bit more confident about the future. I'd paid off the remainder of the mortgage, freeing myself from that weight. It gave me breathing room to consider what came next. One evening, Sophie called again. James, Mara's coming by tomorrow. She wants to pick up some things she left at your place. Is that okay? Sure, I replied, even though the thought unsettled me. It wasn't as if I wanted a fight, but the idea of seeing her brought up old feelings I thought I'd buried. The next afternoon, Mara arrived at the house. She looked different, happier maybe, or at least lighter. Hi, James, she said, standing in the doorway. Hi, I said, stepping aside to let her in. She walked through the house, gathering a few odds and ends she'd left behind. You've kept the place nice, she commented. Thanks, I said, trying my best. After a few moments of awkward silence, she turned to me. I wanted to say, I think this was the right decision for both of us. I nodded. I agree. I hope you're doing well. I am, she said with a small smile. And you? I'm figuring it out, I admitted. It's been different, but not bad. Well, good, she said. I'm glad. With that, she picked up her things and headed for the door. Take care, James. You too, Mara. As the door closed behind her, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. It was finally over. That evening, I went to Riley's for a beer. He raised an eyebrow when I walked in. You look like you've seen a ghost. Mara stopped by, I said, sliding onto a stool. And it was fine. Civil. I think we're both ready to move on. Well, good for you, Riley said, setting a beer in front of me. Now, what are you going to do with your freedom? That's the big question, I said, taking a sip. Any suggestions? Riley grinned. Start living, James. You've been in limbo long enough. The next few weeks were transformative. I took some of the lottery winnings and booked a weekend trip to a nearby city. It was nothing extravagant, just a chance to clear my head and explore a new place. The change of scenery did wonders for my perspective. One afternoon, while walking through a park, I noticed a woman sitting on a bench with two young children. She looked exhausted but had a kind smile as she watched them play. Something about her struck me as familiar, though I couldn't place it. When the kids ran over to her, one of them tripped. She knelt to help him, her voice soft and soothing. It reminded me of something I hadn't realized I was missing. A sense of family, of connection. Back at Riley's the following week, I mentioned the encounter. You ever think about starting over, Riley? I asked. Every day, he said with a laugh. But it's not about starting over, James. It's about figuring out what you want and going after it. He was right. For the first time in years, I felt ready to figure out what I wanted. And this time, I wouldn't let fear hold me back. Over the next few days, the image of the woman in the park stayed with me. Something about her calm strength and the way she handled her children struck a chord. On a whim, I decided to revisit the park the following weekend. It felt ridiculous, like chasing a ghost, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it might lead to something meaningful. When Saturday arrived, I found myself back at the park. Families were scattered around, kids playing on swings and couples walking hand in hand. I scanned the area, half expecting to see her again, but she wasn't there. Just as I was about to leave, a little boy tripped near the fountain, and a woman hurried over to help him. It was her. I hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the fountain. The boy was sniffling but seemed okay as she brushed off his scraped knee. Excuse me, I said, feeling awkward. We don't know each other, but I think I saw you here last week. She looked up, startled but not unfriendly. Oh, hi. Yes, I bring my kids here often. I'm James, I said, offering my hand. Rachel, she replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm but warm. The boy tugged on her sleeve. Mom, can we go to the swings now? Of course, Evan, she said, then turned back to me. Nice to meet you, James. Likewise. If you don't mind, can I buy you and your kids ice cream? There's a truck over there, I said, gesturing toward the colorful van parked nearby. It's on me. She hesitated, glancing at her son and the little girl, who looked about 6. That's kind of you. Kids, do you want ice cream? They cheered and she smiled. Okay, sure. As we sat on a nearby bench, the kids eagerly devoured their cones. Rachel and I made small talk. I learned she was a widow, her husband having passed away 3 years ago. She worked part-time as a graphic designer and spent most of her time raising her children. It must be tough, I said, doing it all on your own. It is, she admitted. But they make it worth it. She smiled at her kids, and her face softened in a way that made my chest tighten. What about you? She asked. Are you from around here? Yeah, born and raised, I said. I've been reevaluating things lately. Let's just say the past year has been a turning point. She nodded as if she understood. Turning points can be good, even if they're hard. As the afternoon wore on, we said our goodbyes, but not before I worked up the nerve to ask for her number. She hesitated for a moment but then wrote it on a napkin. Call me sometime, she said, her tone casual but sincere. I will, I promised. Walking back to my car, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of something, hope, maybe, or the thrill of possibility. The following week, I found myself staring at the napkin on my kitchen counter. Riley's words echoed in my head. Start living, James. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed. Rachel answered on the 3rd ring. Hello. Hi, Rachel. It's James. From the park. Oh, hi, she said, her voice brightening. How are you? I'm good. I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me? Just the 2 of us this time. There was a pause, and for a moment I thought she might say no. But then she replied, I'd like that. Our first dinner was simple, just a quiet restaurant downtown. Conversation flowed easily, and I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. She told me more about her late husband, her struggles with grief, and her determination to build a good life for her kids. I told her about Mara, the divorce, and my own journey to find what was next. By the time we parted ways that night, I knew this was something I wanted to explore further. Rachel wasn't just kind or beautiful. She was real, grounded, and resilient. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized I was ready to let someone in. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I began seeing each other regularly. It started slow, coffee after work, a stroll through the park, or meeting her kids for a casual lunch. Evan and Lily warmed up to me quickly, and I found myself enjoying their company more than I ever expected. They had Rachel's resilience and wit, and their laughter brought an energy to my life that had been missing for far too long. One evening, as we sat on the couch in her modest apartment, Rachel opened up more about her past. Evan barely remembers his dad, she said softly, her eyes fixed on the framed family photo on the wall. Lily remembers more, but even she's starting to forget the little things. His laugh, the way he'd read them stories. It's hard to keep those memories alive for them. You're doing a great job, Rachel, I said. They're amazing kids, and they know how much you love them. Thanks, she said, giving me a small smile. It's been a long road. I didn't think I'd ever let someone into our lives again. Her words caught me off guard. I hope I'm not overstepping, I said. You're not, she said quickly, placing a hand on mine. If anything, you're what I didn't realize we needed. Her honesty floored me. I squeezed her hand gently. I feel the same way. I didn't think I'd be ready for something like this. But here we are. One Friday evening, I invited Rachel and the kids over to my house for dinner. It was the first time they'd see the place, and I wanted to make it special. I spent the afternoon tidying up, mowing the lawn, and even attempting to weed the neglected flower beds Mara had left behind. When they arrived, Evan and Lily immediately made themselves at home, running through the backyard and exploring every corner of the house. Rachel stood in the kitchen with me, watching them through the window. This place is beautiful, she said. You've done a great job keeping it up. Thanks, I said, It's been a work in progress. As we sat down to eat, the house felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. The kids' laughter echoed through the dining room, and Rachel's smile lit up the space. For the first time, I saw the house not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as a canvas for what could be. Later that night, after the kids were asleep in the guest room, Rachel and I sat on the back porch. The night was cool, and the stars were bright. "This feels nice," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Almost like home." "It could be," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She looked at me, her expression a mix of surprise and something deeper. "James, are you saying what I think you're saying?" I took a deep breath. "I know it's early, and I don't want to rush things, but I can see a future with you. With all of you." Tears glistened in her eyes as she reached for my hand. "I can see it too." From that night on, our relationship deepened. Rachel and the kids began spending more time at my house, and slowly but surely we started blending our lives. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, challenges with balancing work, and the complexities of navigating a relationship with children involved. But through it all, we leaned on each other. One Saturday, as we watched Evan and Lily play in the yard, Rachel turned to me with a playful smile. "You know," she said, "this backyard could use a swing set." I laughed. "Consider it done." That afternoon, we went shopping for one, and by the end of the weekend, the kids were swinging and laughing under the warm autumn sun. Watching them, Rachel leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. "No, Rachel, thank you for bringing life back to this house, and to me." As the weeks turned into months, Rachel and her kids became a regular part of my life. My once quiet house now felt alive, filled with laughter, toys, and the occasional chaos that comes with having young children around. It was exactly what I didn't know I had been missing. One chilly Saturday morning, as we were all sitting around the breakfast table, Lily looked up at me with wide eyes. "James, are we going to live here forever?" she asked innocently, her fork poised over a pancake. Rachel froze, her eyes flicking to mine, unsure of how to respond. I smiled at Lily, considering my words carefully. "Well, Lily," I said, "I think that depends on what your mom and I decide. But I'd love for you to stay here as long as you want." Lily grinned and went back to her pancake, satisfied with my answer. Rachel's cheeks flushed, but she smiled softly at me, a silent thank you in her eyes. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Rachel and I sat on the couch with a glass of wine. "You handled that perfectly," she said, leaning into me. "I meant it," I replied. "I know it's a big step, but I've been thinking, maybe we should make this official. Move in together." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and emotion. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. This house feels like home again because of you and the kids. I want us to be a family for real." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "I'd like that too." The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Rachel began the process of packing up her apartment while I cleared space in my home to make room for her and the kids. We repurposed the spare room for Evan and set up a cozy nook in Lily's room where she could store her books and toys. By the time they officially moved in, the house was transformed. What had once been a solitary space now felt warm and vibrant, with colorful drawings on the fridge and tiny shoes lined up by the door. One evening, as we sat on the porch after the kids were asleep, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rachel's eyes widened as I opened it to reveal a simple but elegant engagement ring. "Rachel," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "Meeting you and your kids has been the best thing to happen to me in a long time. You've brought life, love, and purpose back into my world. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, James. 1,000 times, yes." The weeks that followed were filled with wedding planning and excitement. Evan and Lily were thrilled at the idea of being part of the ceremony, and Rachel's parents were overjoyed to see her happy again. Even Sophie, who had been my rock during the divorce, was fully on board, teasing me about how quickly things had changed. "I've never seen you like this, James," Sophie said one evening over dinner. "Rachel and those kids are your world now." "They are," I admitted, smiling, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." The wedding was a simple affair, held in the backyard of our home on a sunny spring afternoon. Lily was the flower girl, Evan was the ring bearer, and Rachel looked breathtaking in a flowing white dress. As we exchanged vows, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for Rachel and the kids, but for the journey that had brought me to this moment. When the ceremony ended and the kids ran to hug us, Rachel whispered in my ear, "Welcome to the family." I held her close, knowing that this was the start of a beautiful new chapter. For the first time in years, my life felt whole. Married life with Rachel felt like stepping into a warm, comforting rhythm. The house was no longer just mine. It was ours. Evan and Lily adjusted quickly, and I found myself falling even more in love with them as I helped with homework, attended school events, and became a part of their daily lives. One evening, a few months after the wedding, Rachel and I sat on the porch as the kids played in the backyard. She turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Have you ever thought about expanding the house?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Expanding? Like adding rooms?" "Yeah," she said, gesturing toward the backyard. "The kids are getting older, and it might be nice for them to have a little more space. Plus, we could add an office for you. I know you've been juggling work in the dining room." I considered her suggestion, imagining what the house could look like with a few modifications. "That's not a bad idea," I said. "We've got the space, and with some of the extra funds I've tucked away, it's doable." Rachel smiled. "I thought you might say that." Over the next few weeks, we began planning the renovations. We hired an architect who sketched out a design that included 2 additional bedrooms, a home office, and an extended living area. It was ambitious but exciting. As construction began, the house became a hub of activity. The kids were fascinated by the process, watching the workers and asking endless questions about how things were built. Even Rachel got involved, helping to choose paint colors and fixtures. One evening, as we sat among the chaos of construction dust and unfinished walls, Rachel leaned against me. "This house is really starting to feel like ours," she said. "It is," I agreed. "And it's only going to get better." The renovations were completed just in time for the holidays. With the expanded space, we hosted Thanksgiving for the first time, inviting both Rachel's family and Sophie's. The house was filled with laughter, the smell of turkey roasting in the oven, and the sounds of kids running through the hallways. After dinner, as everyone sat around the table, Evan stood up, holding a piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said shyly. "It's about James." All eyes turned to me as Evan began to read. "Dear James, you're not my dad, but you've been the best dad ever. You play with me, you help me with my math, and you make my mom smile. I love you." My throat tightened as tears threatened to spill. Rachel reached over, squeezing my hand, her own eyes glistening. "Thanks, buddy," I managed to say, pulling him into a hug. "I love you too." As the years went by, our blended family thrived. The kids grew, the house evolved, and Rachel and I built a life together that was filled with love, challenges, and joy. I never forgot the path that led me to this moment. The heartache of my divorce, the solitude of my empty house, and the chance encounter with a woman who changed everything. Life had a funny way of surprising you when you least expected it, and I was grateful for every twist and turn that had brought me to this family, this home, and this new beginning. Years passed, and the rhythms of our family life settled into something resembling perfection, or as close as any family could get. The kids were growing fast. Evan, once a shy and uncertain boy, was now a confident teenager with a knack for soccer and an ever-growing collection of trophies. Lily, ever the bookworm, developed a love for writing, often scribbling stories late into the night. Rachel and I marveled at their growth, often sitting on the porch in the evenings, reminiscing about the days when their laughter had first filled the house. One summer afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon a dusty envelope tucked behind an old toolbox. Curious, I opened it and found the paper I'd written down my lottery numbers on all those years ago. Memories of that time flooded back, the uncertainty, the solitude, and the overwhelming relief when life had started to turn around. "James?" Rachel called from the kitchen door, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's that?" I held up the paper. "Something from the past. Remember when I told you about the lottery ticket I didn't cash in until after you and I got together?" She smiled knowingly. "Of course. What about it?" "Just thinking about how much has changed since then. Winning that money felt like a big deal at the time, but it's nothing compared to what we've built here. Rachel walked over, her eyes soft as she took the paper from my hands. It might have been a turning point, but everything after that was you, your choices, your heart. Don't give all the credit to luck. I chuckled. You're probably right, but I'll never forget how it felt to think my life was turning around. And I'll never stop being grateful for you and the kids. She leaned up and kissed me. We're pretty grateful for you too. As time went on, our lives continued to evolve. Rachel's graphic design work flourished, and she even opened her own small studio downtown. I expanded my role at the company, finding a balance that allowed me to be home most nights. The house became a hub for holidays, birthday parties, and the occasional impromptu barbecue with neighbors. Evan eventually earned a soccer scholarship, heading off to college with a mix of excitement and nerves. The day we dropped him off, Rachel cried on the drive home, and Lily sat quietly in the back seat, holding my hand. It feels so empty without him, Rachel said later that evening as we sat on the porch. It does, I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. But he's going to do great things. And we've still got Lily to keep us on our toes. Rachel laughed softly. You're right. She'll probably be running the world by the time she's his age. Lily, true to form, blossomed into a talented writer. By the time she graduated high school, she had a short story published in a local magazine. Watching her beam with pride at the awards ceremony reminded me of how far we'd all come as a family. One evening, years later, as Rachel and I sat on the porch, now empty nesters, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. James, do you ever think about what life would have been like if things had gone differently? If we hadn't met? I took her hand, running my thumb over her knuckles. Sometimes, but honestly, I can't imagine anything better than what we have now. You and the kids, you're my world. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. I feel the same way. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the yard in a warm glow, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was everything I could have ever hoped for. As the years rolled on, life continued to weave its intricate patterns. Evan graduated college and landed a job coaching soccer at a prestigious high school. Lily, true to her ambitions, published her first novel before she turned 25. Rachel and I couldn't have been prouder, watching our children, carve their paths in the world. Our home became quieter but never lonely. The kids visited often, bringing laughter and stories that filled the spaces they had once occupied daily. Holidays were still sacred gatherings, the house brimming with love and memories. One crisp autumn evening, as Rachel and I sat on the porch, a ritual that had remained our constant. She reached over and took my hand. I was thinking, she said, her voice soft and contemplative, about how far we've come. It feels like a different life when I think back to that apartment. Just me and the kids. I squeezed her hand. It was the beginning of something incredible. I don't regret a single moment. Neither do I, she said, her eyes glistening. But I'm so glad you took a chance on us. It wasn't a chance, I said, smiling at her. It was the best decision I ever made. As time marched on, the years brought a new chapter: grandchildren. Evan's wife, a kind and vivacious woman named Claire, gave birth to twin boys, filling our lives with new energy. Lily, ever the adventurer, decided to adopt a little girl from overseas, naming her Ella after a character in one of her favorite childhood books. Watching Rachel cradle Ella for the first time, I felt the same awe I had when I first saw her holding Evan, and our once bustling house turned into a sanctuary for visiting grandchildren, filled with toys, laughter, and the occasional spilled juice. Rachel and I reveled in the chaos, finding joy in every visit. One evening, many years later, Rachel and I found ourselves once again on the porch, now adorned with a swing that our grandchildren loved. The stars twinkled brightly, and the air carried the crisp scent of autumn leaves. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" she asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. "The best," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "Better than I ever imagined." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the glow of the porch light. "I wouldn't trade a single moment. Neither would I." The journey that had begun with heartache and uncertainty had led to a life overflowing with love, laughter, and meaning. Rachel and I had found each other in the chaos of life, and together we had built something beautiful. As the night settled around us, we sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and listening to the distant sounds of the world we had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was enough. Thanks for joining us on this journey of love, loss, and second chances. What would you do with a fresh start? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.